Welcome to Modern Management of the Older Adult, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence.
Everyone, my name is Kay Mayordomo. Welcome to the MMOA podcast. I'm an outpatient physical therapist and a TA with the Older Adult Division of the Institute of Clinical Excellence. Today we will be talking about emergency and disaster preparedness for older adults and how we as rehab providers can help. So maybe it's the hiker in me that always wants to be and needs to be prepared, have a go bag, have extra chargers. Although my friends may tell you that I'm not the best at keeping my phone charged on a regular weekday, but I usually do a great job keeping it charged when I'm out hiking with my dog. But I think it's that made me think like, how prepared are our older adults for emergencies? So, we've been hearing things about wildfires in California. There's flooding, there's tornadoes, there are hurricanes going on all over the US. And so I kind of wanted to see, is there any research on how prepared older adults are usually for these kinds of disasters? Because they can really leave our older adults with things like property damage. It can potentially contribute to morbidity or mortality. And disasters are expected to increase in frequency and severity. So why not prep for things like this? Kids in schools do prep for things like earthquakes and school shootings and stuff. Why is there so little talk about older adults being prepared for disasters and emergencies? So today we're going to go over a study called Predictors of Emergency Preparedness Among Older Adults in the United States. And we're also going to go over what they found and how we can put some of that into practice. So the goal of the study was to examine predictors of emergency preparedness and confidence in an older adult's ability to address emergency situations among a nationally representative sample of older U.S. adults. So they took community-dwelling older adults, so living in their own homes, ages 50 to 80, and they had 2,256 for their sample size. They asked them about emergency preparedness and their confidence in addressing different emergencies. So these older adults were given a survey. They were asked about their experience with past emergency situations, the use of community alert warning systems, communication about preparedness with family or friends, use of medical equipment that requires electricity. So think things like things for dialysis or something. Emergency preparedness supplies, confidence about preparedness, information sources in the event of a disaster, opinions about likelihood of experiencing a disaster, and lastly, perceived challenges associated with evacuation if they needed to evacuate. So what they found was among these 2,256 respondents, the mean age was around 62.4 plus or minus 8 years, so that 50 to 80 age range, and 52% were female. Of the four categories of race and ethnicity, 71% were non-Hispanic whites, 11% were Black, 11% were Hispanic, and almost 7% reported being other races. So it represented kind of a good chunk of the U.S. I wouldn't say necessarily all areas of the U.S., but I would say generally. 32% held a bachelor's degree or higher. More than half, so 56.7%, reported a household income of more than $60,000 per year, while 20% had a household income of less than $30,000. So 73% had experienced an emergency situation in their past year. Among all respondents, 16% lived alone, 9% used medical equipment that requires electricity, 9% used mobility aids. So living alone was associated with a decrease in preparedness for certain actions. So these actions included lower odds of having a 7-day supply of food and water, having a stocked emergency kit, and having had conversations with family or friends about evacuation plans. The use of essential metal equipment requiring electricity, that was associated with higher odds of having a 7-day supply of food and water, but it wasn't associated with having a 7-day supply of essential medications and equipment. Having a stocked emergency kit, or having had conversations about evacuation with family or friends. So this study kind of helped figure out who the at-risk group of older adults are in terms of emergency preparedness, and it kind of tells us who may benefit from interventions to help with preparedness. So the at-risk group were summarized to be living alone, using mobility aids, or devices needing electricity. I would say the study didn't look at anyone over the age of 80 years old, so that was a limiting factor in the study. But I think the important thing to note is it gives us a good idea of who is at risk for needing help with preparedness, or just like who isn't as prepared as others. So putting this into practice, I think as rehab providers, we are definitely in a unique position to identify these at-risk people, because these are questions and observation that we already make on an everyday basis. We know which patients live alone because we ask them about that. We know what their support system and community looks like, or at least we should, right? We should ask what their support system looks like, because that is a big factor in how they're aging. It's a big factor in just how they go about their day and their lives and socialization. We know what kind of assistive devices they use and what their medical history looks like as well. So it definitely gives us a unique insight into preparedness too, because we are already prepping people to be able to go about their day more easily. So with less fatigue, we're already going over how can we have them prepare for falls or help avoid falls. We're making sure they can go up and down their stairs with laundry and pick up their grandkid and pick up their pets. We're also helping them get off the ground in case they do fall. So in a lot of ways, we're already preparing our older adults for everyday things. I think it is an idea for us to also help them prepare for emergency situations, because otherwise, who will? Like, who is going to help them figure out what they need in case of an emergency? So I think having a discussion with our older adults about this is helpful, because a lot of anxiety comes into not being prepared, right? It's like, oh, what if this happens? I don't know what I would do. So if you notice, like with our older adults, when they start to become fearful of falling, they start to freeze up. Like, they don't know what to do. They'll just stand there. So in terms of preparedness, we don't want our older adults to freeze up because they haven't thought about this at all. We want them to be ready. So I found some resources. If you've been following the older adult crew for a while, we talk about resource dealing and making sure our older adults have access to what they need. So I'm going to make a reel about this for Thursday, but I pretty much found this little workbook thing, Take Control in 1, 2, 3 Steps, about disaster preparedness. It's a guide for older adults from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and also ready.gov. There's also this sheet that we'll go over on Thursday, but pretty much it is going over, 1, assessing the patient's needs. So pretty much knowing what their risk is. So now we know that the at-risk group consists of living alone, using mobility aids, and having devices needing electricity. So I think if older adults have a better idea of their needs during an emergency, then we can tackle those needs. So step 2 is to make a plan. So in this guide, it talks about making a comprehensive emergency plan and emergency preparedness kit tailored to this to the patient's needs. Like if they have diabetes, let's say, we need to make sure they have enough insulin. If they need an assistive device to get around, because otherwise they're at a fall risk or get fatigued too easily, we need to make sure they take their assistive device with them if they had to evacuate or something. And then just kind of working through different scenarios would be helpful as well. So like, what if a flood happens? Or what if an earthquake happens? What if a fire happens and you need to make sure that you are evacuated in a timely manner? So things like that. I think just knowing like what disasters or emergencies or like natural disasters are common in your area, and how can we make sure our older adults are prepped for it. And lastly, 3, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but engaging their support network. So helping, like if they build a strong support network, they can have them included in their emergency planning. So just like who to call if they do need help because they can't quite get all of their supplies in order or can't get into their car or whatnot, or if they can't drive, like who do you call in case of those situations? So I thought it was a really helpful guide because it also has pages of like a checklist of what to do, like if you live in a rural area or if you have limited resources, like what resources are out there for them. So I will link this, but I will also go over it in a reel on Thursday. But yeah, so we can help them assess their needs. We can help them make a plan and then make sure they touch base with their support system to prepare the best that they can. So I mean, the other things that we're already working on, like making sure the patients are as strong as possible, making sure they have as much endurance as possible, and really helping them know when to ask for help. And sometimes it's like, okay, I don't want to be in a vulnerable position, but I am, and asking for help can be tough for them. But I think in the long run, it's really helpful for you to, make them feel heard and seen and know that it's okay to ask for help when you need it. So, coming to you with a little bit more on the guides on Thursday, but today we pretty much went over a study that examines predictors of emergency preparedness and their confidence in their ability to address emergency situations. We talked about what the results were. So pretty much older adults who are living alone, using mobility aids or devices needing electricity are more at risk of not being as prepared for emergencies. And also we talked about how we can help as rehab providers to make sure patients are prepared as possible. So making sure they have access to resources they may need and a checklist to make sure they're checking off all the boxes in terms of like what are the absolute necessities that this patient needs in case of an emergency. All right, that's all I got for you guys today. I'll talk to you guys soon, and I hope you check out the reel going in more depth into the emergency preparedness, guys. Hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the MMOA podcast. If you found this helpful, please share with someone that could benefit. And if you're looking for more practical content to help you better serve older adults, head over to www.mmoa.online, where you can learn more about our free resources, our community, continuing education courses, and our certification. Once again, that's www.mmoa.online. Thanks for listening.